Hi, and welcome to Simple Shifts Conversations to Fuel Your Body, Mind, and Soul. I'm Martha McKinnon from the blog Simple Nourished Living, and with me is my partner and brother, Peter Morrison.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. So today I thought we would talk about my dear golden retriever, Franny, and what I learned about gentle weight loss from her. But before we jump into that, what's going well in your world?
Well, it's a beautiful day for one thing.
Okay,
We've had
that's
a stretch of cooler gray days, so we're seeing blue skies and sunshine today, so that's really nice. And we were talking something a little bit ago about you were talking about component meal prep or ingredient meal prep. And this week was kind of a busy week, and I found we were out and came home one day and were kind of at a loss for what to have for dinner. And I just happened to have some quinoa that I had made in the refrigerator, some leftover. It was I had air fried broccoli and sweet potatoes earlier in the week.
mm-hmm.
Had that in the fridge and had some leftover chicken. So I just ended up making it was too cold for a salad. We eat a lot of salads, and so wanted something a little more belly warming, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up making these little bowls with quinoa and chicken and the leftover vegetables and some I just used like a teriyaki marinade bottle that I had in the refrigerator.
Uh-huh.
So but it was so I mean, I still don't know about having a whole lot of components, ingredients in the fridge, but just having something
Yeah.
to start from just made the meal so much easier. And um the only stress was what is it, how are you going to combine it? But it wasn't like starting from scratch. What are we going to have? And I just chuckled because I'm like, oh, this is what Martha was talking about, the whole component thing. So it was really cool
Well, that's cool because that's
and
like
good.
it's an insight, right? And like you're saying, it doesn't have
Hmm.
to be all or nothing, you know. I think we all have to just figure out what works for us in any moment. But like you said, it's there's something nice about opening the fridge, opening the pantry, and having like seeing something and getting an idea like of what you might be able to do with that. Like you said, instead of just having nothing to start with and having to start totally from scratch, which can be, if it's been a long day and you're tired and you're hungry in the moment, it can just seem over like an overload, right? To try to figure it all out. So that's cool.
And that's where we were. We were totally like, you're hungry,
Right?
but you just didn't really want to start a meal from square one. So,
Well, good.
but
So
it
I'm
worked out.
I'm glad that worked. And maybe we can add that into the post somehow, maybe you can add a comment about your experience and so that people can start to get ideas because I think that's sometimes really helpful for people to have concrete examples from which to draw, so leave a comment.
I will try to remember to do that. I'll add it to my
Add
list.
it to your list. And please, yeah, I mean, again, to all of you watching this, we do have a growing library of podcasts. We've been doing this for a few weeks now. And so if you go back and look at that topic, that podcast where we talked about this concept of component or ingredient meal prepping, which is kind of like more of a sort of almost kind of like a restaurant approach. When you go to a restaurant, they've done a lot of prep, they've got a lot of stuff ready, and that's how they can make these wonderful dishes for you and, deliver them up in just 10 minutes. They're not starting from scratch. And so it's kind of a fun and different way of thinking about getting a meal, a lunch, or a dinner on the table in relatively short order. So And I've been playing more and more with it.
And what I like about it too is, depending on what you have available, obviously, you can sort of, well, if I wanted a soup, I just needed to, heat some broth and toss it into a broth, or you want a bowl, you can do a bowl, or so it's easy to adjust to based on, do
What
you
you're
want a
feeling.
lot? Do you want you're not that hungry? Do you just want a little? So,
And I think like you're saying, it's sometimes more practical because while some type of meal prep and meal planning is very important, oftentimes what I found with the more traditional approach is, you plan it a week ahead, you go do your shop, you pick your recipes, but then like the weather shifts, or your plans shift,
hmm
or you're feeling, what seemed like something you would want last week isn't as appealing now. And so, like you said, if you'd opened up the fridge and seen those components, the roasted veg, the quinoa, the chicken, you could have thought, ooh, soup. I mean, that might have appealed to you, or salad might have appealed to you on a
hmm
bed of greens, or it just gives you a lot more flexibility, I think, in just being able to respond to how you're really feeling in the exact moment instead of feeling locked into something you decided, a week ago. So,
Yeah, and I'm notorious for not really knowing what I want until it's mealtime.
right. Which is,
So,
which makes it's more tricky then, right? There's more,
hmm
there's more pressure in the moment. And I'm all
but
about,
if you have things ready to go,
right,
you can adjust on the fly, as
right.
opposed to, oh, we're having, if you predetermined it, like you said, the week before, it's like, well, I don't really feel like chicken pot pie tonight. I want
Right.
something else.
So it's just
So,
another way to think about it. It's just another,
hmm
another way of thinking about it, another tool, right, in the toolbox. So yeah, so that's great. I'm glad that that worked. So
me too.
yeah, it's always good to it's always good to feed yourself without having to resort to, you know, uh, a DoorDash or something like that that would be expensive um,
hmm
and usually caloric, right? Restaurants are, I mean, I'm often shocked. I loved those Eat This, Not That. Remember those books back in the day? And they would often share, the calorie realities of a lot of the menu items. And it was always shocking to me. How does a restaurant put that many calories in a dish? You know, it seems like it would be a lot of effort. So, yes, you have a lot more control. It's going to be a lot healthier, a lot less expensive. So, it has a lot of advantages for sure. So, what I learned about losing weight, gentle weight loss from my golden retriever, Franny. So, Franny's been gone a few years now, but my beloved golden retriever, she was a devourer of food. I think maybe she had been the runt of the litter or something. I mean, she seemed always hungry, and she was one who devoured her food. And there was a point where I took her to the vet, and the vet said, she needs to lose she needs to lose some weight for her own you know, health and wellness. And so, um, what did I do? How did I help her? How did I help her achieve her weight loss? It's like, I thought about that in comparison to what we often do to ourselves when we decide that we need to take off a few pounds. As I look back on it, it was just so easy and so natural and so sort of common sense. I mean, basically at that point we were feeding her twice a day. And because of her weight, she was getting this like sort of heaping cup of kibble. And what we had purchased for her sometime earlier than that was one of those puzzle dishes, the dishes that allow the food kind of gets spread out so that the dog doesn't eat it so quickly. Because oftentimes she was eating so fast that she would then glurp up some of her food. So the puzzle dish, and I'm sure we can share a picture, in this podcast, so people don't know what we're talking about. It's basically just designed like a spiral, just to kind of slow her down. And so we just, at that point, we didn't get drastic. All we did was we took what had been her overfilled cup of dog food, and I just kind of made sure I leveled it off, or went with this kind of a scant cup, and kept the food the same, but took what was an over, filling cup to a scant cup, just kind of leveled it off, and did that, and then cut back, didn't totally cut out her treats, but cut back, bought milk bones instead of giving her big milk bones, bought smaller ones so that she didn't feel that she was losing out on her treats. And we were walkers anyway. We walked. And that was really it. That's what we did. And over the course of a few months, she lost the weight. Lo and behold, that's all it took, was to just basically decrease her portions. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that experience, because I think sometimes we make it so hard. I didn't change up her food. I didn't look for a lighter food. I didn't, it's like, what do we do to ourselves when we decide we want to lose a few pounds? Where does our mind go? What are some of the things we start doing?
Is that a question?
Yeah. Have you ever noticed like where your mind goes? Or like me, it was like I start reading books. I think I have to, you know,
Mm.
change out my whole way of eating. I had a friend recently, we were out with friends, and he's struggling with his weight, and he needs to have surgery. And they've told him that before he has the surgery that he needs to lose 30 pounds. And, he's a food lover. And he looked at me, and he knows what I do. And he said, Martha, I have a question for you. Can you help me with this? He says, I need you to give me I need you to give me a meal plan. And I just know from experience that that's not the solution. We can't just take somebody, their total way of life, and have them suddenly drop their whole way of being into um, a different food plan. And that's actually what spurred my remembering this conversation.
Mm.
Because what Rod said to me, he said, "Oh, I wish," and I basically explained to Ray, it's like it just doesn't work like that. I can give you lots of ideas on how to change up what you're doing, but it really has to come from you and what works for you, because what I like to eat might be totally foreign, to the way that you're eating. And Rod said to me after, he says, I wish you had mentioned to him our experience with Franny, and the fact that it really was
Mm.
was that simple. It was really about, it can often be about as simple as just taking a look at your quantity. Often we look at what we're eating instead of really looking at how much we're eating. And that can be a very powerful place to start, is to just take what you're eating and eat less of it. And this comes back to the mindless eating concept of, 20% less, and then maybe bulking up to make up, so that you're not feeling like you're missing out, bulking up on, your fruits and vegetables and salads and things to offset where you're eating less of the starches and the proteins and all that. So,
So
um,
I'm curious with Franny, I had a thought. Knowing that you guys always walked, how do you think it happened that she even got to the point where she was overweight? Because do you think it was more treats, or did you start giving her slightly more food at her mealtime?
I think it could be. I mean, it could be the fact that, you're not, and again, it can be that subtle in us too, where suddenly, she was, you're suggesting a cup of food, but the cup becomes a heaping cup. I mean, and that's enough
Mm.
probably to turn it into like 1 1/8 or 1 1/4, right? If you're really heaping up. Because I just used like a plastic measuring cup. It can be that little bit over time can really start to affect things. And yeah, I mean, may there have been extra treats, may there have been extra like pizza crust and things like that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
quite conceivably. But I mean, but I think that that's what can happen to us. It can be that gradual, a little bit of overeating over time, and suddenly you take her to the vet, and she probably went to the vet once a year in good health, right? And so it's been a year, and a year of that overeating, but even that little bit caused her, I mean, again, because you're talking about somebody who's, 35, what she was probably 40, maybe 45 pounds. So it was enough for the vet to say, she needs to lose a few pounds. So that's another reality that happens to people over time. I know it happens to other friends down here, where suddenly women are going along fine, 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 you lose, you're gaining a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds a year. It doesn't seem like very much, but then suddenly, you know, a lot of my friends are at, menopause, or moving beyond that, and suddenly your metabolism is slowing down, you're losing muscle mass, you're maybe more sedentary than you were younger, you're still eating the same or maybe eating more, just because gradually portions can get bigger. And now you're suddenly 20, 30, 40 pounds overweight and you're very, very frustrated. When the reality is, and you want it off now, but the truth is it happened gradually, over years and decades. And so it can be that subtle. And I mean, and so that's what I'm really excited about, is exploring with people the power of these gentle shifts. Because the more I study habit change, the more I look back at my experience and the experience of others and look at the challenges of those, I'm hanging out with, I'm just seeing this. I just had this other insight that just came to me. It's really that subtle. And I'm just having this awareness that what we're really struggling with is this disconnect between our environment and our biology. The fact that we were designed for a very different environment. Our biology is all designed for, living in a feast or famine world where food was sometimes scarce, was sometimes plentiful, where there was a lot more physical activity, and now, and now there's just, look at the environment now. Food is everywhere. Um, and not, if it's not food itself, it's the advertising for food, right? On television. Where do you go even these days where there's not temptations, coffee. It used to be bookstores. You didn't really, but now there's coffee shops often attached, with muffins and brownies attached to the bookstore. You go for gasoline in the convenience store, you go to, and there's food. I can't think of anywhere you can go where there isn't food. So that's the bottom line, is that we're not broken. We're doing exactly what our biology is designed to do. The problem is the environment is so much shifted, and the reality that these gradual, um, eating a little bit too much, a little bit too little, can really affect you over time.
Right. And you've got the gradual change that causes the weight increase. But and the another disconnect is people want it gone, not gradually, they want it gone quickly. So
And that just adds a bunch of stress.
that's
And then
it.
we can talk. And so it's
Mhm.
like you can just see how all this, and then stress adds this whole next layer of problems, right? And complexity, because everything's more difficult when you're stressed. Where if you're calm, things are, think about your own life. Like when you're trying to get something done and you're feeling stressed versus trying to get something done when you're calm. Like it's a heck of a lot harder to accomplish anything, right? When you're feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, stressed, um, and feeling all that, having all that negative, thinking and emotion around it. So what we've taken, what's a really pretty basic and simple concept, and I think just overcomplicated it. And I think maybe it's our human nature to make things, you know.
Well, that makes me think. So I saw a comment on Facebook this morning. I want to see if I could find it real quick. 'Cause I can't find it real quickly, but it was something along the lines of, I'm like an old Weight Watcher from back in the day, and I, I used to have success with the program, but her mindset was sort of, from my perspective, a little harsh on herself, because she said something along the lines of, under the new plan, she's like, I'm not losing weight, I'm just maintaining.
Hmm.
And I was thinking, well, that's success. Isn't it?
I think so. And in fact, that's another topic that I think we'll talk about soon. This whole concept of maintenance. I think what we could all benefit from, is a maintenance first mentality, and maybe taking a maintenance
Mm-hmm.
first approach. Like try to get to stability, before you try to, to try to really change things up. But I think there's a lot of harshness. I think we do that to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves where we think we need to be a drill sergeant, or we can't. We have sort of a negative outlook as opposed to a positive outlook. So you could look at that and spin it and say, I've learned to maintain. And that's a really great step,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now
Mm-hmm.
if I never did anything more than that, at least the problem's not getting worse, right? And now I've got this point of
Right.
stability from which I can start to continue to explore. So again, it's all depending on how you see it. Internally herself, she was beating herself up.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be the power of the support that can happen in these meetings, right? Somebody can say that out loud, and then others around can point out and remind that that can be a very positive step. That's a step in the right direction, because now you're not gaining anymore, which is great, you know.
Right. And I was thinking, well, if you get that under control to something you're comfortable with and you're really confident, a few small tweaks, right? A
Right,
little bit more exercise, a few less calories here and there, and then
right,
I would think you're going to start moving in the right direction
right.
from
Yeah,
there.
because ultimately we want to get to maintenance, right? And it's like you're there. I mean,
Right.
you've already got that part of it, celebrate
Mm-hmm.
that, like you said. But again, it's
Mm-hmm.
spinning the way you're seeing it, which is sometimes what people need help with, because we do tend to
Mm-hmm.
be really hard on ourselves. So,
Do you think Franny suffered isn't the right word, but do you think obviously she doesn't have any control? I mean, she eats what all of our pets eat what we give them, but and she adjusted obviously, but do you
yeah, I
what
think,
am I
and
trying to
that's why
ask?
we consciously didn't like take away the treat. We consciously didn't like take away the treats. And I don't know. I mean, I guess we're projecting on ourselves what we think our dogs are
Yeah.
experiencing, and
Yeah.
we can't really know for sure. But I think we didn't really change the routine at all. It's not like we only fed her once a day. We didn't make a drastic shift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
we made the milk bone smaller. You know, we cut down the food just a little bit, but the food was the same, so she didn't have to adjust to a different food. So I think we did it in a gentle way. I guess I can never know for certain, but I feel pretty confident that um, she didn't exhibit any real,
Mm-hmm.
unhappiness from that. She's a golden retriever, they're so happy. Um,
Right.
Most of the time,
Right.
they're just happy dogs. So did that make sense? And I think that you can just get these insights. It, you know, and just be learning from so many different um, experiences in your life. Sometimes you don't need, a diet expert or a nutritionist. Sometimes you just have to look at, something as simple and basic as your pet, and what would you do for your pet, you know, who is struggling, and just think about how you could apply that to your own life. And sometimes you can almost just to start to laugh when you see like the ease um, with which you can sort of start moving towards your goal.
Right, no drastic overhauls, no cleaning out the fridge, no special foods, no special
Right.
vitamins, no,
Right. And start
it
with
was
that, and
just
just get used to that and see
Mm-hmm.
how that feels for a while, right? And then you can just again continue to assess, you know, your situation. And again, make gradual shifts. Could suddenly, if that wasn't enough, could I take her on a 10-minute, start to increase the time we were walking, or add a walk? I mean, there's so many, when you really start to think about incremental shifts, you start to see all kinds of little things you can do that just don't overwhelm you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's where we start to really begin to feel empowered, and 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 excited maybe is an overreach if you're really struggling, but at least you start to feel like you have more control, and that you have more control than you realize.
well, that also made me think of as a few episodes back now. When I mentioned when I'm preparing the meals, it's based on my appetite level,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the more active one,
Mm-hmm.
burning a lot more on a daily basis. But now I've cut back to instead of making each of us a sandwich for lunch or a wrap, I actually make one and just cut it in half Neil's happy, I'm happy. And if it's not quite enough for me, well, I'll have a little bit of yogurt, or I'll have,
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
couple bites of a banana or something a little more. But even at my level, like sometimes a whole sandwich was just too much. So it's sort of where I wouldn't have, if I was like on my own, I probably wouldn't have necessarily made that connection. But since since Neil asked me just to maybe cut back a little bit,
On the
I'm like, well,
portions. And that's really
on
cool.
the
And that brings up, I
portions.
think there is I noticed in our spreadsheet there was an inquiry from a reader about the issue, and maybe in a little bit more extreme term, where she's the caretaker. She's the one who needs to be more cognizant and watching her weight. She needs fewer calories, but she's the caretaker for her husband who has some health problems and needs significantly more calories. And she was talking about how to deal in some strategies for dealing with that reality. And so this is one really good suggestion for her. And maybe that's something we could, in a future episode, just take a deeper dive into to talk about all these ways
Mm-hmm.
and all the adjustments we can make when, one partner in the family needs significantly more or less than the other. And this can happen a lot. I mean, if one person has a more active job, if one person's significantly larger, than the other
Mm-hmm.
person, if one person's older. I mean, so there's a lot of times where this can come up um, where the nutrient needs, the amount of food required is just very different between the two people. And what
Mm-hmm.
are some strategies where you're not having to totally have two separate, meal strategies? What can you do to make it easy? So that's good.
Well, thank you, Franny.
Thank you, Franny, for inspiring this week's talk. And if you enjoyed this, we would love to have you subscribe, let other people know, let friends and family know about what we're doing here, because I'm really coming in to understand that this is a big it's a big issue for so many people. And often, especially as we reach a certain age, there are people who never really struggled with their weight, where suddenly you reach, middle age and beyond, and you've got some challenges now that you'd never experienced before, as well as people who have,
Mm-hmm.
been having issues like me since they were a child. So we'd love to have you um, let others know what we're doing here. That would be much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thanks.
great day.
Yeah, thanks. And we'll see you soon. Be well until then.